Hi everybody, this is Ashley with Ashley Says So, and I am back with another old Hollywood scandal video, and y'all know what time it is, honey. Time to get into some of that John Lennon mess. But before we do, I need to give a shout out to Miss Brenda. Thank you so much, my Miss Brenda Angel, for the gift that you sent me from the Amazon wish list. I also want to give a shout out to Miss Melissa. I enjoyed running into you at the grocery store. Thank you for not posting pictures of me looking a mess. And I'm ready to jump into this tea about John Lennon, because why was he always singing about world peace, but really was sitting up there acting like a demon? Let's get to it after this disclaimer. All of my videos are for entertainment purposes. Everything in them is rumor, gossip, and scandal that I get from books, word of mouth, on TV. Let's get to it. John Winston Lennon was born on October the 9th, 1940 in Liverpool, England. His mother's name was Julia Lennon, and his father's name was Alfred Lennon. And Julia and Alfred ain't had no business having no baby. Honey, first of all, Alfred wasn't ever home. He was always somewhere traveling and working. And I guess Julia would be upset with Alfred because he was away all the time. And so she was just constantly cheating. As a matter of fact, when John Lennon was around 4 years old, his father Alfred had come home from one of his work trips. And when Alfred walked into the house, he saw Julia big and pregnant with another man's child. And it was at this point that allegedly Alfred grabbed his young son John and he tried to run away with John. However, Julia ended up chasing them down, asking Stanley to give their son back to her. And this is when a very traumatic moment happened for John Lennon. His father Alfred kneeled down to him and asked him, who do you want to go with, son? Do you want to go with your mother or do you want to go with me? John ended up choosing his father Alfred, but once he did, his mother just broke down into a flood of tears, and so he ran running to his mother. Even though it was finally decided that John would live with his mother Julia, she ended up being unfit anyway, and he ended up being raised by his mother's sister, a lady by the name of Aunt Mimi. And per Aunt Mimi and everybody else, John Lennon turned out to be a very difficult child. He was full of resentment at the way things turned out with his parents, and so he would act out all the time. He would get into trouble at school. He started trying to hang out with the bad kids, and so from childhood to teenager, John Lennon was pretty much out of control, but it was about to get even worse. One day, his mother had come to his Aunt Mimi's house to come visit him and her sister Aunt Mimi, and then as she was walking back home, she was run over and killed by a hit-and-run driver. And at this time, John was around 17 years old, and losing his mother absolutely devastated him. Now he started to drink, he started trying to dabble in drugs. Seems like he was trying to numb the pain, or at least that's what the respectable gossip said. Because, baby, the disrespectful gossip says something totally scandalous, and I'm almost too ashamed to repeat it. But notice I said almost. But honestly though, y'all, these folks know they wrong, because some of this gossip is out here saying that John wasn't drinking and dabbling into drugs because he was sad that his mother had passed away. This gossip says that he was sad that his mother passed away before he could see what that thing felt like. What? Child. Baby, listen, y'all knew John Lennon's tea was gonna be super messy, and we're already at it. Because allegedly, this rumor did not come out of nowhere. The folks say that John Lennon is actually recorded on tape saying, dang, I should have made a move on my mom. I really should have, because, there's a good chance that she would have let me hit for real. Now listen, this is just the beginning of the spicy, messy, twisted tea on John Lennon. So I don't need y'all to go anywhere because there's much more mess coming up. But first, ain't y'all tired of buying a full bottle of perfume just to realize later on that you actually hate the scent? Baby, I know I was, and that is one of the many reasons that I switched to SCENTBIRD. Now, SCENTBIRD is a subscription service that sends you a 30-day supply of designer fragrances every month. Actually, they have over 900 designer fragrances for you to choose from. So let me tell you what fragrances I got this month. I got me some Sexual Noir by Michel Germain. And this is a fragrance with a mixture of strawberries, warm vanilla. It even has a hint of innocent pink orchid in it. Next, I got me some Victoria's Secret's Bear. And this one has one of my favorite scents to it, honey. It's sandalwood. And that Egyptian violet is what brings it on home. And all of these fragrances are something to write home about. But this doggone Get a Room by Confessions of a Rebel, it is one of the sexiest fragrances. And do you know how much it would cost me to try to buy all of these wonderful fragrances in a bottle? Ain't nobody got time for that. And why would I anyway, when I still have fragrance left over after the 30 days? SCENTBIRD usually is $16.95 a month, and that is already a cheap price. I'm gonna give you your first fragrance for only $8. All you have to do is click the link below or scan the QR code and use my special coupon code that's displayed on the screen. Okay, so back to the tea, honey. Now, I'm not sure if John Lennon was drinking, smoking, acting out because he wanted to do some stuff with his mama. But since he was running so far off the rails, it looked like John Lennon was not going to amount to anything in life. But he ended up being saved by his love of music. By the year 1962 came around, he had gotten together with a couple of friends and they formed a group called the Beatles. And of course, this group became absolutely legendary. Now let's go ahead and get into the rest of John Lennon's scandals. So rumor number 1 says the lowdown about John Lennon is that the dude was low down, especially when it came to his first wife, Cynthia. Story says Cynthia and John went to high school together, and Cynthia was crushing on John very early on, but she was always too scared to say anything to him. Well, because John wouldn't make a move, by the time they graduated, Cynthia was engaged to another guy. But her engagement didn't work out, and soon after she had broken her engagement, she ended up going to a party and John Lennon was also there. Rumor has it, when John spotted Cynthia, he walked up to her and he asked her, hey Cynthia, would you like to go out with me sometime? And I don't know if Cynthia was trying to play hard to get, but she told John, I would love to, but I'm engaged. Baby, them folks say John Lennon yelled where the whole room could hear. I don't give a F about your engagement. I didn't ask you to marry me. I asked you, did you want to go out with me? Honey, the folks say that Cynthia's hair was blown back to a train station in Chicago. But instead of walking away, she timidly apologized to John and told him, yeah, sure, I understand, and yes, I would like to go out with you. And said that after she gave John the okay, he was still in his feelings, so he walked away from her and was just ignoring her the whole night, with Cynthia following him around like a little puppy dog. But baby, that ain't nothing. Rumor has it, John did all of this blowing up, acting like Cynthia embarrassed him, but the whole time, this dude had a whole girlfriend. He said the girl's name was Thelma Pickles. And actually, about a week after this party where he asked Cynthia out, he was at another party with his actual girlfriend, Thelma Pickles. And the folks say at this party, John was all rubbing and kissing all over Thelma, and he was trying to get her to go into a back bedroom with him. Well, rumor has it, Thelma told him no and kind of started pushing him away. Baby, the folks say John Lennon slapped fire from Thelma. And allegedly, this is what actually caused them to break up. And I'm sure Cynthia had heard about John actually having a girlfriend with Thelma Pickles and him actually slapping his girlfriend. But Cynthia didn't pay attention to any of that. So what? John had a girlfriend when he hollered at her. They were no longer together now. So now she and John were free to be together, and that's all Cynthia wanted to focus on. And so John and his new girl Cynthia ended up going to a party together. And when they got to the party, John, for whatever reason, started to be distant with Cynthia, started to walk away from her. And so Cynthia ended up chatting it up with another guy, and she started to dance with this guy, but it was only as friends. Honey, the folks say John Lennon heard about Cynthia dancing with that boy, came up and slapped her taste buds loose. Supposedly, he slapped her so hard that her head hit a wall. And the folks say that Cynthia broke up with John just like his ex-girlfriend Thelma Pickles did when he slapped her. But the difference is Cynthia came back after 3 months. And gossip claims Cynthia always said that this was the only time John Lennon hit her. But witnesses and people they grew up around said that John used to bust Cynthia upside the head all the time. In fact, they ended up getting married in 1962 because Cynthia became pregnant with their son, Julian. Word on the street says that John Lennon treated his first son, Julian, like trash. In fact, when John Lennon ended up passing away, most of the public didn't even know he had a first son named Julian. They thought his only son was his son Sean that he had later on in life by Yoko Ono. So nobody even knew Julian existed. And it's because John Lennon allegedly treated Julian terribly. The folks say that John Lennon used to curse him out, that he would scream at the child and be like, put that down, you stupid, stupid boy. And then said if the baby would start laughing, John would be like, shut up, I hate your laugh. It's a stupid laugh. I hate the way you laugh. Like he was just irritated, aggravated with his son. Paul McCartney was so upset with the way John treated his first son, Julian, that Paul kind of stepped up to become a father figure for the boy. So you can pretty much see what kind of nasty behavior that John Lennon had against his first wife and his first child. But his friends and acquaintances would be treated badly too. One day he was hanging with a close friend, a man by the name of Bob Wooler, and Bob Wooler started to joke around with John. And he basically was joking about John Lennon staying in the same hotel room with the Beatles manager, a man by the name of Brian Epstein. Kind of saying stuff like, ooh, John, did you enjoy your night with Brian? Insinuating that the two men had something going on, but in a joking way. John Lennon was laughing at first, and then out of nowhere, he took a stick, I believe it may have even been a pool stick, and baby said he hit Bob Wooler to the ground and started to beat that man, almost beat him to death. Bob's face was all broken and bloody. He had at least 3 cracked ribs. And when people ran in to pull John Lennon off of Bob Wooler, they said that John just kept repeating, he's trying to call me an egg. He's trying to call me an egg, and I don't get down like that. But the messy Hollywood streets say John Lennon did get down like that. And allegedly, the reason he got so upset is because that night that he stayed in the same hotel room with Brian Epstein, the manager, he actually had allowed Brian Epstein to gargle his peanuts, throat his boat. According to the rumor, after Brian was done gulping it up, John was kind of laying on the bed, and I guess he kind of calmed down and realized what happened, what he'd done. And they say he got up out the hotel bed and started trying to fight Brian Epstein, calling him all kind of names. Why did you do that to me? What are you? Like, sir, that man couldn't do nothing to you if you didn't allow it. But maybe the rumor isn't true. Let's move on. When John Lennon wasn't beating people almost to death because of a joke, he was insulting and making fun of handicapped people. And when he wasn't making fun of handicapped or disabled people, he was allegedly making people drink his bodily fluid. Y'all remember that story I told you in the Jane Mansfield video about how he got angry at her, and then allegedly he waited for her to walk out of the room, took her cup of wine, urinated in it, and then watched as Jane Mansfield walked back into the room, picked up that same glass of wine, and started drinking from it. And none of these rumors or gossip is to take away from the genius of John Lennon, but very clearly the man must have had some problems. And then to bring the gossip back around to his first wife, Cynthia, it seems like with the things that John was putting her through, she felt like if she just kept her head down, continued to be a good supportive wife to him, he would appreciate her in the end. Well, turns out John Lennon appreciated Cynthia so much that in the year 1968, he let her take their son Julian and go off on a vacation. Well, when Cynthia and Julian got back home, they found out that while they were gone, John had moved his side chick, Yoko Ono, into their home. And this moment right here is finally when things became just way too much for Cynthia. She ended up divorcing John and leaving him to be with his mistress. And now that John Lennon was with Yoko Ono, the tea in his life became even messier. And let me tell you that story from the beginning. So gossip claims in the year 1966, Yoko Ono was actually an up-and-coming struggling singer, and she was looking for clout. She was looking for a way to get her name out into the public. And allegedly, she started scoping out several famous music groups, but the Beatles were the biggest. And so that is who she decided she would go after. And rumor has it, at first, she was really trying to go after Paul McCartney, but he ended up dissing her. And so she started to pursue John Lennon. And I use the word pursue, but I really probably should have used the word stalk, because the folks say that anywhere and everywhere that John Lennon was, Yoko Ono would show up. Baby says she came to all the Beatles shows trying to get backstage. If John went to a party, Yoko was there. Even if John went and sat down to eat at a restaurant, Yoko Ono would be there 2 tables behind him, peeking out of that hair, looking like Sadako from The Ring. And before y'all get offended, I'm not saying she was looking like Sadako because she was Japanese. I'm saying she was looking like Sadako because that is actually what Yoko Ono wanted to look like. She wanted to have this really mysterious aura about herself. And popping up wherever John was and looking like this ended up working out for Yoko Ono. And later on that same year, in 1966, John Lennon ended up approaching her at an art show. And this first conversation was very brief, but baby, this is all Yoko Ono needed. She latched into John Lennon. She found his address. She started to send him very deep, esoteric, intellectual letters and things like that. Like, for instance, one of the poems that she sent to him said something like, "Hello, John. Open your head and stir your brains with your penis, and then go outside and just smoke anything you can find." Like, what? What does that even mean? And it probably really didn't even mean nothing. But since she was doing this at a time when John Lennon was on a spiritual journey, since John was searching for something, he thought this stuff was so deep and so mysterious. And so he really started to be turned on by this little awkward, weird lady. And so by the year 1967, he and his spiritual mentor, Yoko Ono, had started an affair. Baby, it was some power in that little TT. The folks say that John would bring Yoko Ono to the recording studio with him. If they were out in public and he needed to go to the bathroom, he would make Yoko go with him. If she needed to go to the bathroom, he would ensure he went into the bathroom with her. He would not go a day or a second without being beside this lady. And rumor has it, powerful TT might not have been the only reason John Lennon was hooked on Yoko and following her around everywhere. She also introduced him to heroin. And not only was John doing heroin at this time, he also was doing copious amounts of LSD. And so this new, revamped, deeply spiritual John Lennon started to get on people's nerves, especially the other Beatles. You see, John Lennon was always very arrogant and pretentious, and he always felt like he was the best member of the band. But now he felt that way even more. On top of feeling like he was the best member of the band, he also now felt that he was some kind of chosen son. You know, I'm with Yoko. She's teaching me deep secrets about the esoteric world. You know, this knowledge is chosen for me. And because John was acting like this, the other Beatles could not stand Yoko Ono because they felt like she was the one who was turning him into this person. And so they were hoping Yoko Ono was just a fling and she would get out of everybody's hair. But when John moved her into his house and he and his wife Cynthia divorced, and then when Yoko Ono and John Lennon got married that next year in 1969, they knew Yoko wasn't going anywhere, and they knew it was only a matter of time before the group would break up fully. And they were right. Later on that same year of 1969, John ended up leaving the Beatles. Now, because the rest of the Beatles, allegedly behind closed doors, blamed Yoko for John leaving the group, the Beatles fans and the public always like to call Yoko Ono a witch. She put a spell on John Lennon. She ruined his life. She's nothing but a controlling bitch. And while it may be true that Yoko was possessive, controlling, and she may have had a nasty attitude, it doesn't change the fact that John Lennon was still acting like the demon that he was. Rumor has it one day he and his wife now Yoko were at a party, and John was kind of walking around talking to people, and Yoko was sitting on the couch. Well, while she was sitting there, another young man came and sat beside her, and they just started talking. Well, John ended up spotting this, and he instantly got jealous. But he didn't walk over there and say nothing. He just stood there, peeking around the corner mad. So Yoko is oblivious, and she is just talking, and then out of nowhere, John goes and strolls in front of her, takes a beautiful groupie's hand, and then walks into the coat room. About 2 minutes after the door to the coat room shuts, baby, there are all kind of banging noises, screaming noises, and everything coming from the coat room. Everybody at the party is stunned, and they stop and they look at Yoko Ono, and she is just sitting there humiliated. She has stopped talking. She doesn't know what to say. She is just staring ahead, and it is pretty much dead silence while all of this moaning and crashing and everything else is coming from the coat room. After a while, a lot of people started to get upset because they were very embarrassed, by this behavior, and they wanted to leave. But when they started gathering their belongings to leave, they realized that they needed their coats. And once again, John and the groupie were in there with their coats. When John was finally finished, he walks out of the coat room without saying a word and goes straight out of the door with Yoko Ono sheepishly following behind him. Then what about in 1973 when John Lennon told Yoko Ono straight up that he was bored with her, that he wanted something new, and in saying this made it Yoko's business to go find him something new. And so she went to one of their assistants, a young lady by the name of May Pang. And Yoko told May Pang straight out, listen, John is saying he's bored, we're not getting along right now, so can you please kind of sleep with him for the next 2 weeks? And May Pang must have been waiting for her chance the whole time because homegirl agreed. But to Yoko Ono's horror, not only did John Lennon take a break from her and start sleeping with May Pang, he actually left her for May Pang. And for the next year and a half, he and May Pang traveled the world, honey. He showed her a better time than he had ever shown Yoko Ono. Oh, he took her on all type of fabulous dates. He took her to the theater. They visited all type of exotic places. He even ended up inviting his first son, Julian, to come and stay with him and May Pang for a while. And because life seemed to brighten for John Lennon when he was with May Pang, most of his friends felt like May Pang was a better fit for John Lennon. But just like always, after a while, John Lennon's dark side started to show up. May Pang says that one night they were staying at some very expensive hotel and they had went out into a jacuzzi with a friend of theirs named Harry. She claims that John and Harry were drinking champagne, but John was getting drunk, like overly drunk. And so May Pang says that she said, John, that's enough. You don't need to have any more. Baby said John cursed her out, telling her, I'm grown. I'll do what I want to do. And so May decides to back off and let John continue drinking. However, as the hours passed, John started to kind of slump over, his eyes started closing. He was pretty much blackout drunk. But his friend Harry was still trying to hand over more champagne. And so May, trying to be slick, decided to move from where she was and to sit in between John and Harry because she was trying to intercept the bottle so John wouldn't get it. Well, babe, it turns out John Lennon was not as blackout drunk as she thought he was. And baby, he popped up and started choking the life out of her. Said he was like, you trying to cheat on me in front of my face? You trying to slide over beside my friend so he can feel on you in front of my face? And May was trying to explain that that's not what it was at all, but baby, she couldn't say a word. Matter of fact, she actually started to black out and probably would have died right there in that jacuzzi if John's friend Harry wouldn't have pried John's fingers from her neck. And although this was a very scary moment for May Pang, she still didn't end up leaving John. As a matter of fact, she and some of John Lennon's friends thought that sooner or later they would be married because, like I said, she was with this man for about a year and a half. But to May Pang's and everybody else's surprise, right at the beginning of 1975, something strange happened. She and John Lennon were just chilling in their home when suddenly the phone rang. John picked it up and then started to have a blank stare straight ahead. After listening into the phone for a minute, he hung up without a word, and then without even looking at May Pang, he said, I'm sorry, May. I really like you, but Yoko says it's time to come home now, so I have to go. and then just packed up all of his stuff and left. Honey, nobody knows what Yoko Ono said on that phone, but it was almost like whatever she said into his ear, it put him in a trance. And if it was some sort of magic spell to get him back to her, it worked. And as soon as Yoko and John were back together, she ended up giving birth to their son, Sean. Now, I am happy to report that when it comes to Sean, John Lennon was said to be a great father to him. But because he was a great father to Sean, it is absolutely disgusting the difference he made between Sean and his first son, Julian. Because honestly, when Sean was born, John acted like Julian didn't even exist anymore. Like when people would bring Julian's name up, John would actually act surprised, like he forgot he even had an older son. And so Julian had to watch and hear how his father poured all of this love into his younger brother Sean, spent all of his time with his younger brother Sean, while his father acted like he didn't even exist. John was so cold to his son Julian that when he passed away, he didn't even have Julian's name in his will. Everything was left to Yoko Ono and his pride and joy, Sean. And even worse than that, when Julian tried to contest the will, baby Yoko tried to block it. But speaking of John Lennon's passing, we're actually getting close to that and the end of this video. But before I get to the end, I need to drop some extra T-bombs on y'all. Now, y'all might want to take these rumors with a grain of salt, but they're out here on the internet, and so I'm going to tell you about them. And the first rumor is that allegedly, although John Lennon wasn't physically abusive to Yoko Ono, he would take his anger of her out on their assistants. And rumor has it, Yoko Ono made him so angry one time that he called an assistant in the room and he beat this assistant until she had a miscarriage. The second extra rumor says that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were actually lovers. Story says when they were teenagers and they first formed the group, they were actually in a relationship at that time. And it's said that this is the reason, as the years passed by and the Beatles became more and more famous, that they used to talk about each other's wives so bad. Like that time John Lennon called Paul's wife Linda ugly. The folks say it was because John was upset that Linda was with Paul. Oh yeah, there's another part of that tea too. Rumor has it that at Paul McCartney's 21st birthday party, there was a girl there and she was getting close to Paul. Baby said John Lennon walked up and backhanded that girl, honey. And then when people started running up, to see what was wrong, he started making up reasons as to why she offended him. Talking about she was looking at him wrong. Nah, baby, she was looking at your boo Paul wrong, and you was sitting up there mad about it. And to be honest with you, John's middle name should have been Slap Hand Jan, because baby, it's another story out here about him slapping somebody. Rumor has it sometime in the 1970s, an independent journalist was granted an interview with him. And I guess on one question, she must have went off script or something, because they say as soon as she asked it, John got up and slapped her out of her chair. Now again, I don't know how true all of that is, but I do know that by the time the year 1980 came around, John Lennon seemed to be much more settled than he had been in his younger life. He also seemed to have finally found his destination on his spiritual journey. And even though he was not with the Beatles anymore, they had broken up, it seemed like he was doing pretty well. Rumor has it he was about to start writing music for himself. But on December the 8th, 1980 at 5:00 p.m., John Lennon was walking out of his New York apartment when a young man came up to him asking him to autograph a book. John did the autograph, the young man left, only to return at 11 p.m. when John was walking back into his apartment. This time, the young man didn't have no book, he had a gun, and he shot John Lennon twice in the shoulder and twice in the back. And if you're wondering why I'm saying young man instead of saying the alleged killer's name, which is Mark Chapman, it's because some people are out here saying that John Lennon's actual killer is a celebrated author, and we all have watched at least one of his movies. Child, the folks say Stephen King shot and killed John Lennon and is now walking around today like he ain't done nothing. Now, baby, listen, it is not me saying that. I honestly really don't even believe that, but some people do. There is a whole website dedicated to this theory. And the person on this website says it is not a theory. They say that it is a fact. Now, I have the website link pinned in the top comment under the SCENTBIRD comment, so you guys can go check out that website. And some of the stuff that the website owner says, I mean, it does make sense. You know what I'm saying? Some of the puzzle pieces fit, but it's just a little too far-fetched to me. I just don't feel like there is enough evidence to finger Stephen King for this crime. But other than that, after John Lennon was gunned down on his sidewalk, he was taken to the hospital, but he did not make it. And so John Lennon, the most famous Beatle of all, passed away on December the 8th, 1980 at the age of 40 years old. And so this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous tale of Mr. John Lennon. If you guys liked the video, please like the video. If you guys are new here, please subscribe. I will be back with another video soon. Bye.